Hello, this is Sam and Jordan, and we're going to be going over our 2023 top favorite movies. The way we're going to do this is pretty organized. We have 12 movies that we haven't seen that were released in 2023 that are probably ones that we are our top choices that we haven't seen from 2023. We have 6 honorable mentions. And then we have our top 10 selected movies from 2023. And the way that this will work is we'll go through, one of us drafted each of these. So we each have 5 that we chose. Some of these we share, some of these we don't. Some of these I haven't seen, but Sam has, or I think nothing vice versa. Sam overachieved this year and I think saw everything I saw, aside from one. But
the honorable mentions.
Oh, yeah, one honorable mention.
But first we'll start with our top 12 we have not seen. A lot of these came out in the past few weeks or are not even available.
Some of them mid-January of 2024.
Yes, so if we did this in maybe another few weeks or months, we might see some of these, but a lot of them, especially with the baby, there's not really a way to go to the theater and see all of these. But our number one that we have not seen that we want to see is Colors of the Flower Moon, which I think just came on Apple TV, so we might watch that really soon. The second one is Zone of Interest, the Jonathan Glazer movie. Then we have The Taste of Things, The Boy and the Heron, Dream Scenario, Anatomy of a Fall, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Ferrari, All of Us Strangers, American Fiction, Priscilla, and Wonka.
I would say, some of these are still in theaters right now. Some of these are on streaming, and then some of these are neither. So it's you're kind of waiting until you get access to some of these. It's hard when it's the end of the year after a writer's strike and after everything's been pushed back. I would say, just before we get into the really top movies of the year, that this has been one of my favorite movie release years, where 80% of what is going in theaters, even if it's not a good movie, the premise sounds interesting and unusual, and we're seeing a lot less fucking franchise movies, and there's just so much less bullshit, and it's exciting.
And the ones that are being made are mostly bad, so they're not really on any of these lists.
Yeah, I think there's exceptions in some avenues for us, but generally speaking, we're not much of franchise people. They age like milk and are just they never are prolific enough that, at least this year specifically, hasn't felt like there's been anything franchise related that's...
Well, there is one franchise we'll get to that I have, but...
And some of these are adaptations in some ways or whatever. I think I just mean more
Yeah, MCU's on the downhill. Star Wars is on the downhill. They just announced that the next Star Wars movie is The Mandalorian, and...
They just had a show.
Baby Yoda, but they call him Grogu.
Yeah.
So it's it's already confusing. Is this season 4 or is this just another spin-off movie? We have our honorable mentions. There's one honorable mention I didn't put, The Killer, which is probably the best movie that we've seen that won't be on
either our top list or the honorable mentions.
Yeah, but I felt like it was mildly disappointing after a decent start. But
I think considering it's a Fincher movie, it's a disappointment. Considering it's a movie, it's a good movie. That sounds... Does that make sense, though? As a Fincher movie...
It's well done, for sure. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just, I could have put on honorable mentions, but my least honorable mention is Knock at the Cabin.
Which I did not see.
By M. Night Shyamalan. It's just a funny concept. Dave Bautista has a good performance. It was interesting enough to keep me into it. I didn't like it as much as Old, from, I think, 2 years ago.
I remember seeing that.
But I definitely think it's worth a mention as it's a unique one-off semi-horror movie. It's more of like a soft thriller, but
Which that's M. Night Shyamalan's like avenue. Like that's him, is soft thrillers. Like terrifies 7-year-old Jordan, but puts maybe to sleep 30-year-old Jordan. Which I haven't seen Knock at the Cabin, and I probably would just solely
it has
for a
Ron
thirst watch
Weasley
for,
in
yeah.
it.
If thirst watch for Rupert Grint, I'm there. Like that sounds like a good time to me. So
Oh, okay.
the next one that we have on our honorable mentions list is surprising, I think, to both of us because we wanted to like this more, but it deserves an honorable mention at the very least in its past lives. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are like, "Wow, my God, this was my favorite movie of the year." I think there's lots of like very beautiful things about the movie. It just didn't sucker punch me in the gut like I thought it would, and so I was disappointed that it didn't depress me as much as I thought it would. That makes me sound cold-hearted, but
It wasn't as emotional as I thought it would be. It ended up being just more of a universal story that technically everybody could latch on to, which I get why it's so popular and people like it. Like, it's a good movie, but I just felt as it was ending, I didn't feel like it was rewatchable or something I would return to in either a cathartic way or a happy way. But I do agree it should be mentioned in the honorable mentions.
yeah, for sure. I think there's like certain things about the way it was filmed that I really like. I don't remember the actors' names, but the main two actors had never met each other prior to the scene that they filmed where they were introduced. So that was actually them meeting for the first time, just so that they could like really capture the awkwardness and the like communication barrier, the language barrier that they had, which I think they did very well in this movie. But
Our next one is Bottoms.
I think I liked this one a little bit more than you.
Yeah, this one is like right on the edge of the top 10, maybe the funniest movie of the year.
Yeah, like I liked Bottoms because it really does bring back the high school ridiculous scenario movie where you're like, this would never happen in real life. But like once you kind of understand that that's the shtick, it's really easy to get into and just like buy into as like a concept. Like, I mean, the concept is that it's two lesbian girls starting a fight club so they can wrestle with the cheerleaders. Like, that's never going to actually happen in real life. So the way that it's shot is like, it's just very like funny and ironic, and there's a lot of good needle drops, and there's a blooper reel in the credits. Like, it doesn't get any like cornier, cheesier, campier, awesome than that.
Yeah, Marshawn Lynch is really funny. The ending where they're at the football field and all the crazy stuff happens is really funny. Our next honorable mention is one that I have not seen, but Jordan has seen.
Yes. I was surprised that I liked this as much as I did. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's directed by the same gal that did The Edge of 17, and I can't think of her name right now. And I think these are literally the only two things she's ever directed, and they're both like very poignant, coming of age for a girl type movies. And I think she does it well, and she knows what she's doing. And Rachel McAdams in this movie is just so good and like so believable. And I like that there's a lot of parts of this movie that focus on the grandma, the mom, and the daughter. And it's like you really like, there's like things that you can relate to as a woman at all stages of your life for all of these women. Like, there's just so many funny like little moments that happen. It's also like set in the 70s, so every single scene is just like bathed in like, it feels like you're in like an antique shop, because every single thing and every single label you see and every single fixture in this shop and every single appliance and everything is like, oh, this is the 70s. I totally believe it. And it's like, just the set design is incredible. And the like costuming and stuff is also very good. But yeah, surprised that I liked it as much as I did. I was like tearing up at a few parts, and I was like, I really am just a girl.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that at some point. Our next one is Napoleon, which I saw by myself in the theater.
And I have not seen.
Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon. Yeah, going into this movie, I knew very little of the historical accuracies of what actually happened with Napoleon. And it's pretty funny watching it through that lens. I know a lot of historians dislike this movie because it gets things wrong, and I honestly don't even know what it gets wrong, and I don't even care. It's just a movie. And there were so many parts. It's decently long, but like there's so many parts where I was like, oh, this is where Napoleon dies. Oh, wait, no, this is where he dies. Oh, actually, I guess it's this part he dies. And then he just kept surviving. And like, I won't get too much into the details, but there are so many like random things that happen that are so absurd that I'm trying to imagine like a current day American figure doing some of these things, and it's just like crazy to think about. And there are a lot of connections with modern America and late 18th, early 19th century France, but we won't get into that right now. But overall, Ridley Scott, good epic, a lot of good action sequences. The part where they're on the frozen lake and they fight is probably the best part of the movie. I need to rewatch it, but I was almost going to put it in the top 10, but it's basically my number one honorable mention.
And my last honorable mention, I actually think I would like to rewatch this. It's like 90 something minutes, I think. Like, it's a really short little movie, but it's Rye Lane. And I like this one because it's done where it's set in modern age and it's a rom-com and it doesn't make you want to throw up. Like, it's not like sugary sweet, and it's also not like playing into the millennial like joke humor that's just so overdone at this point. Like, it's actually like just very refreshing, and it feels like two kind of imperfect people who just form like a really cute little companionship, and it's very, very believable. I think it's all set in one day, which I love that shtick.
Yeah, it's very Before Sunrise-esque.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way.
I think it's a better version of Past Lives. I know Past Lives is trying to do something different as far as a romantic movie, and Rye Lane's obviously more on the comedic side, but I think as far as a relationship goes, it's the better relationship than anything in Past Lives, which I think is another reason why we have that one lower.
Yeah.
Than Rye Lane.
Rye Lane feels funnier and a little bit more realistic to me. Past Lives, in my mind, I don't mean this slanderously, but it feels slightly melodramatic. And I'm all for melodrama, but that's, I think, the part of like Rye Lane that seems rewatchable to me versus Past Lives. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not ready to be mildly depressed again.
And Rye Lane, I feel, is more organic in how it comes about, whereas Past Lives is more meticulously like, oh, they haven't seen each other in this amount of time, and if it wasn't for Facebook and Skype video messaging, this wouldn't even be a story that happened, whereas Rye Lane's like, these two people are in the same spot, same time, and they just like
feels
connect.
Very meet cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, our top 10. So we basically went back and forth drafting in order our favorite 10 movies. So
and each of us got 5.
Yeah, so I'll start with number 10. And again, this is a joint list.
Some of these are shared. Some of these could move up higher had it been only my list, or lower had it only been Sam's list. Or maybe some of these wouldn't exist had it not been for the other person having watched it / shown it to us. And all 10 of these we've both seen except for one, which we'll get to. But number 10 is The Holdovers with Paul Giamatti. I just love Paul Giamatti.
We watched this New Year's Eve on Peacock. Great performance, great just like slow moving, great editing from scene to scene, transitions with music, just classic 70s, like slow jam, relaxing. A lot of good wide shots outside in the snow. You get a real sense of the time and place, and Divine Joy Randolph is probably winning the Oscar for supporting actress. She's really good in this.
She's incredible.
And then the newcomer, I think it's Dominic Sessa, is the teenage boy. Him and Paul Giamatti have a great back and forth. And it's just like a slice of life movie.
It's like over 2 weeks, basically, like the Christmas break.
Yeah, and it's also set in the 70s, like, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Yeah.
So
similar type of
just wholesome.
Immersiveness into the 70s also. Yeah, and super wholesome. So it was 70s wholesome movies this year.
Yeah, there's been a few.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked The Holdovers. I love Paul Giamatti. I like that he plays a very grumpy old man in such a way that it's not a caricature of a grumpy old man. It really feels like you might have had a teacher like this at some point.
Yeah, he's almost like the opposite of Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society.
Yes,
but
exactly.
I mean, it could have easily become like a evil teacher, like he's the villain type thing, but like the whole time it's actually like you feel bad for him, even though he is kind of a asshole at points for sure. But like, I think they do a very good job throughout the story, like showing how the characters change and
that's the thing.
Bond over the situation they're in.
Yeah, like every single character in this movie is not the same person that the movie started out with. And like, it's hard to say that about a lot of movies, that you can follow like a character arc for four different people, three different people, which I think is nice. And they change for like the better. And so that's like, yeah, it's like just a very comforting movie. I like that one a lot. So the next one is number 9, which we both loved this one a lot. And this is May, December. This one's a hard watch because the subject matter is like pretty intense. The weirder part of this is the tone. There's like, and again, I mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of like melodrama that almost feels a little soapy in like a weird way. There's a lot of like just overly delivered lines. There's a lot of like ridiculous scoring that just feels like you're watching a soap opera. But then there's just moments of like true clarity that you're like, oh, like the tone of the movie and the way that it's being shown is actually very like metatextual in a way where it's like, it's actually trying to reflect back what the characters in the movie are trying to achieve, which is representing somebody else's life as like basically like Natalie Portman is playing Julianne Moore's character, and she's trying to study her as like a character acting type of like exercise for a movie that she's going to be in, starring Natalie Portman as Julianne Moore. So the way that the movie, as the third wall, Us, is shot, it's like kind of goofy when you think about it, because that's basically what it's doing for us, is doing this like bad rendition of this story.
Yes, and I think Charles Melton as Julianne Moore's victim/husband. He's the star of the movie, and if he's not in this movie, it's not as good. Because the idea is you're following Natalie Portman's character the whole time, and you're trying to learn more about Julianne Moore and what happened and why this is becoming a movie. But if you actually watch this movie through the eyes of Charles Melton and what he's thinking, it makes it even more enjoyable and interesting, I feel like. But yeah, great performances all around. And yeah, the melodramatic parts make it to where at any moment something silly or crazy can happen, which I really like in movies.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8 is the only movie Jordan hasn't seen, which is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, i.e., also known as Mission Impossible 7. I just rewatched this on a plane. I've seen this twice now. I saw it in IMAX in the theater, and then I saw it in a plane, so I got it both
on the ground and in the air.
To the different perspectives.
All different screen sizes.
Yeah, I won't talk about it too much because Jordan hasn't seen it, but basically, great action, Tom Cruise. I really liked it. I think it's not as good as Fallout or Rogue Nation, but I think it's the third best Mission Impossible movie. The whole driving through Rome sequence is awesome. The train sequence at the end is incredible. And I think what puts it over the top from other Mission Impossibles is the fact that they have artificial intelligence as the villain. And it's like, it's funny that this and The Creator came out the same year. The Creator is also about artificial intelligence. But, like, this movie makes the threat seem, like, legitimately, like, impossible to, like, figure out and defeat. And some of it's convoluted at parts, and it's kind of, like, there's a part 2, which I think got delayed because of the strike, so I think that's coming in 2025 now. I don't know.
My goodness.
But yeah, Tom Cruise action, it's always pretty much always going to be good. But our number 7 is Saltburn, which Jordan can talk more about.
Yes, I drafted this one. This is definitely... There's 2 things I should mention about this. The first is that I had to watch it twice, and the first time I watched it, I did not like it, did not enjoy it, did not have a good time. Which I won't get into, like, all the details of that, but it was a movie that I basically went into somewhat blind, didn't really know what was going to happen, watched what was going to happen, kind of had a, like, what the fuck is this type of moment where I was like, this is ridiculous. And then every single day for, like, 2 weeks after that, I thought about it and kept thinking about it and kept thinking about all the different, like, beautiful shots, insanely good soundtrack, like, how fun it was for how, like, weird it was. So then I rewatched it and then was like, yeah, I actually love this. And I tend to do that with movies sometimes. Like, I hate watch something until I'm like, oh, I actually think I like it. The second thing I'll mention about this movie is that I think this is oftentimes taken as 2 different things. One is that it's a movie that is overly inflated and is kind of silly and thinks it's deep and really isn't. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is how I feel about it, which is I don't think it takes itself that seriously. And I don't think it's that deep of a movie. I think it's just a fun time. And there are different elements of it that have, like, Easter eggy type stuff with, like, Greek mythology and stuff. You could probably easily find TikToks that will explain it all to you. But I don't think that's necessary for enjoying the movie. Like, I don't think any of that is important. I mean, it's just a fun time. It's a movie that's just a rare note to strike with people, which is, this is terrible, but I had such a fun time with it.
Yeah, I think you have to vibe out to it and just, like, accept the insanity of it all, because there's definitely moments that are, I think, too cringe to consider it great cinema. I think it's still a good movie overall, but I think if you've seen this movie, you know the parts I'm thinking about, but there's definitely 2 or 3 parts where I'm just like, not only does this not have to be shown, but it doesn't really make the movie more enjoyable or make me want to watch these parts again. But I think the overall aesthetics and musical choices and the performances and the way a lot of it is shot is really, really good.
I think this might not be the answer you would agree with, but this is how I feel about that, is like they're probably one more of those scenes away from being an actual serious movie. Like one more weirdo scene, and then you're like, oh, this is a movie. But it's like just one of those too few, so that they happen so sparingly that you're like, why is the movie littered with these like kind of like cringe, unhinged things for seemingly no reason? It's just like for shock value a little bit.
Yeah.
Upon rewatch, I almost wanted there to be more of that. So for that, it strikes a note that's like very specific, where it's like kind of horrifying, kind of fun. You're not really sure how to feel about it. You're kind of turned on, but you don't want to be. Like it's just a confusing movie in a way that like I would definitely buy it. I would definitely revisit it. I can't help but be susceptible to the like weird girl marketing that surrounds it. Like it is what it is. And we like to compare this movie being kind of my guilty pleasure weirdo movie to the next one, which I think is probably arguably Sam's guilty pleasure weirdo movie of the year. I preferred Saltburn to this one, and he preferred this one to Saltburn, so...
Which is number 6, is Beau is Afraid. And we saw this in the theater, and I haven't seen it since, but I need to rewatch it. Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is really good. I really just like the Odyssey aspect of it, and him going to different areas, either through within his own mind, and anxieties were actually like going to different places. And I just think Ari Aster is just like on a different wavelength than a lot of people, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's like really, really good. I just think he's like really, really unique, and I loved Midsommar. And I think the things he's able to film make in this, where he's like show like there's no other movie that's better at visualizing anxiety, and there's no other movie that's I've seen that shows exactly how the Joaquin Phoenix character Beau, like he takes some sort of hallucination drug in the car, and he he like slowly becomes like high, I guess, but it's like his surroundings slowly go away, and it's like a black void, but he's still like, it's just crazy how they shot that. And it gets to the point at the end where it can be overlong, but I think it sticks the landing by being funny and having that funny sex scene with the Mariah Carey song.
And that's not even the only funny part. Like there's
there's a lot more funny parts, but I think at the end that really sends it home for me. And I think it's weird enough to like not necessarily put it higher on the list, but I think it's weird enough that it's worth digging into and like thinking about, which so many movies nowadays are just like, oh, I watched that and it's over and I don't remember 90% of it.
I feel like TikTok should have heard about Beau is Afraid, but somehow TikTok never heard about it. It seems like a very virally TikTok-y type movie where it's just like, watch this shocking thing happen in the movie theater right now. Let's go see it. Like, it's not quite as like girl-centric, I guess, as Saltburn potentially, but it feels like one that I would recommend to people who like Saltburn, because it's like, if you just want to watch weird shit happen, like, see this. I also really liked just what the guy said that was in our theater when we like finished the movie. There's just a guy to our right that like as soon as the movie ended, he was like, well, that was a movie. Mm-hmm. And that's like the only thing you can say coming out of this movie is like, yeah, that was a movie. But it definitely leaves you thinking for like a long time. Whether you're thinking because you're like slightly horrified still, or because you're thinking of the funny parts, or because you're not even sure what happened. I would compare Ari Aster to like David Lynch in that way, that like they both have a great way of striking that like horrific note, but like without being blatantly horror. Okay, so we're in the top 5 now. Number 5, we recently saw, and it is a Finnish film, I think. Yeah, it's called Fallen Leaves. It's only like 81 minutes or something, so it's quite short. And I'll preface this by saying we've only seen this once. It's completely unavailable to watch, except for if you catch it in like a very small theater.
And our view was obstructed, so we couldn't read all the subtitles. But we could hear when people laughed at certain parts, which we couldn't laugh at because we don't speak Finnish or could read the subtitle to know what they were actually saying.
I was able to read a majority of them, but you had more of an obstructed view than I did. But I was able to catch pretty much most of the dialogue that was necessary for understanding the movie. It's not very dialogue heavy. This, like, what I liked about this so much is that I didn't need to see all of the subtitles to kind of get the mood of the movie and the, like, ironic nature of the movie. It's definitely, like, dark romantic comedy, or I would maybe even say, like, bleak romantic comedy. It's got, like, a very Punch Drunk Love type of feel to it. And that it's just, like, two sad people who are broke, who kind of like each other. And, like, that's pretty much all you need to know. There's also a dog for, like, a good third of this movie that's just in a lot of the shots. And that's just, like, a great way to, like, lull you into a state of comfort, is to just have a dog on screen. I really want to re-see it because I want to catch all of the dialogue that I missed.
Yeah, I liked the ending. We won't spoil it, but it was a happier ending. And yeah, I think you liked this more than I did, but I would say on a rewatch and be able to read all the subtitles would probably make me like it more. But it is a quick little melancholy turned happy, like, romance short movie.
Yeah.
Our number 4 is Infinity Pool.
I think now that we're in the top 4, like, number 4 you drafted, but our top 4 are generally just shared.
Yeah, I think the top 3 are exact.
Yeah.
I think you have Infinity Pool pretty high, but yeah, this one came out, like, super early in 2023, and then it got on Hulu.
This is, like, a deeply misunderstood movie.
Well, it came off the White Lotus, Eat the Rich kind of subgenre. This is by Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son, starring Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård. Yeah, like, it's kind of, like, once you get the story, it's kind of, like, surface level, like, okay, they're on a vacation, and he gets in trouble, and there's an infinity pool, but it basically devolves into, like, well, if the justice of my inaction, of my, like, transgressions is only worth this much of my life, why don't I just keep doing it forever? Which is kind of what they fall into, and it becomes kind of like almost like a purge element, where it's just like, we can do anything we want because we're rich and can
just pay for
go
it
into the infinity pool. And
yeah.
Mia Goth, this is probably her best performance besides Pearl.
Yeah, she's incredible.
But yeah, this, like, solidified Mia Goth as, like, top tier
up and comer. I mean,
yeah.
like,
and Alexander Skarsgård has had a ton of recently good movies, like The Northman. And this is obviously a different type of movie than that, but he plays it pretty well as kind of like a underworld investigating like what's going on into like a semi nightmare into like a hedonistic
Feels very
craziness.
feels kind of like Kubrick a little bit.
There's like a ton of visual moments that are really stunning, and then it's also like Beau is Afraid, where there'll be parts where they'll take a drug, and the way it's shot is intense and crazy.
It's also not like overtly just horror. It feels kind of like a thriller horror.
Yeah, it's not that it's scary. It's like it's more of like there's horrific elements, and then it becomes a little sinister towards the end because you're trying to figure out like what is your life worth compared to your transgressions, and at what point do you not care anymore, or what point do you give up and just try to be human.
Yeah.
And it's I just really like how the story transpires, and I really like the performances. And it was pretty much immediately my favorite movie of the year until we'll get to our next three, but it's still after seeing all these other movies, it's still
very highly ranked.
Yes, and I did rewatch it a second time, and it still holds up. So that's number 4.
Nice. So number 3 we saw in theater with friends, and this was just an experience you had to have in a theater in this last year. And if you didn't, I feel sorry for you, because the amount of people that dressed up for this, I think it's pretty obvious we're talking about Barbie, but the amount of like just different aged women wearing hot pink in this theater was just the most like touching thing to me. This like is a movie about a Mattel doll, and it is, you know, in a weird way kind of capitalistic to just be making a movie about an existing toy, and like it kind of lives in that same universe as like arguably as like you know, the Tetris movie or any of these other ones where it's just a movie about a game or a toy. Like, this does it with the most like finesse that I've ever seen, and it like goes beyond just being like a really good movie like the Lego movie is. It kind of like takes itself a little bit more seriously than that, and like really tries to say something and does it very, very well.
Yeah, you got to give up to Greta Gerwig, writer-director, and Margot Robbie. You know, she's not only the star, but she's the producer, and she basically handpicked the director, Greta Gerwig, and they kind of, I've read some Wikipedia stuff or saw some YouTube where it was like, they were discussing how to create a Barbie movie, and I think, you know, like you mentioned, there's so many generic, like, brand movies, like Tetris is one of the worst movies of the year. Stuff like that, where it's just like, here's our product, and
let's make a movie around
yeah,
the product.
and Greta Gerwig's like, let's actually try to like put in all these like big brain thought exercises of men and women in society, and creating this really like pristine plastic production design of the Barbie world, but then to have her leave Barbie world and go to the real world and having to deal with all that, like, I think that was so well done and thought of. And also the Ryan Gosling Ken element is really good. And I think if this was just generic blonde actress as Barbie in Barbie world and that was the movie, it would be terrible. But because it's like the perfect cast, the perfect people behind it to like actually create something and create an actual movie, and I think it like clearly outperformed what most people thought it would do or be.
Yeah, and I think it even goes beyond, like, we talked about how, you know, The Killer was a disappointment as a David Fincher movie, and Barbie comparatively is overperforms for an IP movie. I don't think that I give Barbie credit because it over exceeded my expectations as an IP movie. I think I like Barbie so much because it goes far beyond. It understood the assignment, and it was like, I'm actually going to make this my Harvard thesis instead of just my year-long research project. Like, it took itself so seriously that you, like, really have to respect what it's doing. Anybody that's, like, just not into it, I just feel bad for you, because it's just like, yeah, it's one of those things where
it's like the ultimate summer movie too.
It really
just
was.
Turn your brain off and vibe out.
Oh yeah, like, it's big brained enough that it's not like you're not gonna have to put too much energy into like really thinking about the subject matter, but it's also like just fun enough to where it doesn't feel cheesy in like a stupid way. It feels cheesy in like the perfect ways. Also the like just the soundtrack in general, the amount of like original songs that came.
That was the other thing. Yeah, they got like current popular pop stars like Dua Lipa and Ice Spice
Charli
and
XCX.
Nicki Minaj, and they all came up with original songs, which I think took it up even another notch.
Yeah.
From what it could have been.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, our number 2 is Oppenheimer, which we saw on the same day as Barbie. We did the Barbenheimer thing.
And had Chili's in between.
Yeah, we saw Oppenheimer, then we went to Chili's, and then we went to Barbie. Yeah, Oppenheimer, great performances, great visuals, interesting way of ending the film with it being a lot about Robert Downey Jr. and the aftermath. But it made you think about, like, it really made you not just think about the morals behind should we make an atomic bomb or not, but it was like, I like the pacing of the movie, especially the first 2 hours, where it's like, if we don't do this, someone else will, and if it's the Nazis, like, the whole world could end. So, like, they're almost trying to create this weapon of war to end all wars, because it's like, if you have the threat of a nuclear bomb, in theory, then there wouldn't be any fighting at all, which kind of has come to fruition the past 60 years in some instances, but ultimately, them creating it, building the team, building the town, just the conversations about, if we do this, is the entire atmosphere going to turn into fire and every human dies instantly? I don't know. It's not near zero or whatever, or it is near zero, but it's not zero. Like, that aspect was very interesting after they do the bomb, and Oppenheimer's like mentally trying to deal with what has happened, and he meets with the president, Gary Oldman as Harry Truman, and Truman's like, I'm the one who did it, you just built it. And it's like,
that realization for like Cillian Murphy's character.
And the bottom line at that point is like, it doesn't, like, obviously Oppenheimer's important and he's the one who orchestrated this whole thing, but at the end of the day, like, America was going to figure this out one way or another because they're America and they have the military industrial complex to do this and the funds and everything. And then I really liked Benny Safdie's character, who was like, no, we need to go bigger. We need the hydrogen bomb. We need to, like, make it even bigger and be even more powerful. And it's like that element of, when is enough, and
excess.
If you can't wrap around the moralities of an atomic bomb, how do you do it with a hydrogen bomb? And, like, even, like, the small little scenes of, like, where are we going to drop the bomb? Well, we can't drop it here because me and my wife honeymooned here, so I don't want to drop it there. And if we drop it over here because of the mountains, no one's going to see it. And it's, like, very sad but, like, crazy. Shout out Florence Pugh. What about What do you have to say?
Honestly, I had a really good time watching this, but I was just looking at the list and realized in our top 5, this is the second movie we've talked about where we definitely did not catch a lot of the dialogue. One was simply because we couldn't read all of the subtitles in Fallen Leaves. Oppenheimer is because they just talk a lot, and it was really hard to catch all that. I don't say that as a negative. I'm saying that as this is our number 2 movie, and we still didn't catch all of the dialogue. You really don't have to catch all of it to enjoy it as much as we did. I think I'd like to watch it with subtitles on.
Yeah, we just got the Blu-ray, so we'll probably rewatch it with subtitles and get a better grasp. Because definitely the last part of the movie where it's all like men talking in suits, if like you stop paying attention for 20 seconds, you're going to be lost kind of thing. And so that's definitely going to be helpful to rewatch.
Yeah.
All right, our number 1 film of 2023 is a joint pick, and we just watched it in theaters, and it is Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos, starring Emma Stone, Willem Dafoe, Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, this one is just...
I'll let you start.
Yeah. So I've been like kind of a closeted Yorgos Lanthimos fan for like a while. He's another one of those directors that make something that if you really either like it or you really, really don't. And I've seen a couple of his movies and have like generally liked most of what I've seen. I think there's maybe a few that like aren't going to be for me totally, but I'm into the way that he films things being kind of jarring and a little like off. That's kind of a theme for a lot of the movies I like, is like just feeling a little bit weird, and like it sticks out in your memory as being just unusual or uncanny in a weird way. Poor Things is like for sure a genre bender movie. I would say if you had to put one, it would be like it's a drama, but there's also kind of a lot of like body horror elements. There's a lot of comedy. There's even like somewhat of like it could be considered a monster movie. It could be considered like a thriller in a way. But overall, I think like I really liked this movie just because it's very hard to not connect with Emma Stone's character. Like, this is a movie that you can go into it trusting the main character. I don't think that gives anything away. You really can just put yourself in her shoes and just be her. There's so much about her that is incredibly relatable. I think like conceptually, just trying to like achieve what they did with this movie, it's very difficult. I was watching several interviews with like Yorgos and with Emma that were talking about how, you know, the concept is that Emma Stone is basically a girl version of Frankenstein with the brain of a child in a woman's body. And so the weirder part is that she progresses as an adult, but only through an adult body. So she has like very childish, infantilized type like behavior in the beginning of the movie. What's more interesting is that they couldn't film this chronologically because they only had the London set for so long. So they had to film her first stages of life in the beginning of the movie, and then the very next day they had to go and film the very end of the movie where she is basically completely actualized as a person. And how Emma Stone is able to keep those like life stages of her progression organized and like succinct is next level, because it's just like she's full blown like body acting.
Yeah, Emma Stone definitely needs to win the Oscar, and I know she already has one with La La Land, but this is on another level because like all you're saying, I didn't even know what you just said, which makes it even a better performance. But like, yeah, the amount of body acting she does, the amount of verbal dialogue that comes with not just a Yorgos movie, but with I'm a infant trying to learn words in my brain character arc. It's crazy how that progresses, and it's just an unflappable performance that is like there's not like she owns the entire movie, and there's not 1 second or one scene where she is below par in anything that she's doing. And Willem Dafoe is really, really good, I think. Mark Ruffalo is hilarious.
I have been a Mark Ruffalo hater for most of my life. I just feel like I don't really like actors or actresses that play the same thing in every movie. And for me, most of the Mark Ruffalo movies I've seen, he just plays Mark Ruffalo talking under his breath. Just kind of has the same voice in everything. This movie, he is insane and is so different than anything I've ever seen him do. I also was watching in interviews with him that he like had a lot of anxiety about doing this because it's so different for him, and he was like had a lot of like self-doubt and would like tell his co-stars that and would be like, are you sure that I'm the right person for this? And it's like, it's really actually kind of sweet to think about that he was just so humble that he thought that he wasn't good enough for this role, because like he really does play opposite Emma Stone so well. And again, Emma Stone is like a powerhouse in this movie. Like there is no competing with her acting, and yet somehow Mark Ruffalo does in like a role he's never done before. The other thing that's like, again, similar in vein to Barbie, that it's like a woman's progression into like self-actualization. I feel like with Poor Things, this is like strong female lead movie. And like, I love a good strong female lead that you can trust, that is like somebody you could see yourself being in like the best way possible, while also like showing them having a very like real life and having like, I say real in the most fantastical sense, but I mean like doing very human things like making choices or overindulging or not being sure how to make a decision or things like that. Like I just really appreciated that about Poor Things. It feels very like transparent about like what being a person or being a woman is like without, when you're completely unbound from like societal perceptions. It's like, this is really what it's like inside the mind of a woman.
Mm-hmm. And also the costume design.
Yes.
A lot of the cinematography and the colors are really good. And the use of animals is really funny, especially at the very end. No spoilers, but it's really well done.
Yeah. This is just, again, it like strikes a really nice note of being just like completely unhinged, off its rocker, weird, dry, awkward, just like a good Yorgos Lanthimos movie does. But then at the same time, it really has this like very surprising heart side to it that like I don't think people will necessarily be expecting. But I think that's what made it such like a favorite of mine, was just actually how like warm it was by the end of it. But yeah, I could keep talking about Poor Things forever. I already really want to re-see it. The other happy thing about this too was our theater going experience for Poor Things was just immaculate. We walked in and we took a trip. We were in Seattle, and so we were at like a kind of like smaller theater that wasn't like a chain, because we wanted to like try different theaters. And like right before the movie plays, they were like, this showing has subtitles for the hearing impaired. And we were like, yes, we're not hearing impaired.
Yeah, we had subtitles for this one. For some reason, the theater had it.
There's just, there's something nice that adds to the experience when you can make sure you catch every piece of dialogue. And especially something like this where there's a lot of like wordplay, a lot of accents, a lot of like half-developed language. You know, it was good to be able to actually read, you know, along with it.
So that is our 2023 top 10 movies and honorable mentions.